It's interesting because I so often hear people say, well, that if they really love me, they're just going to accept me as I am. And I'm like, who even does that? None of us do. We all want someone who's willing to grow. We all should be willing to grow.
Yes.
We're not going to be the same person in 10, 15 years that we are today, hopefully. Well, friends, here we are this week for our culture segment. And for those of you who are young professionals squarely in that 20 and 30 something space, you for sure know the term adulting. Some of you love it. Some of you hate it. You think it's all condescending and whatever. But the fact is, learning life skills and becoming that grown-up who can take ownership for your stuff, for your decisions, for your mistakes, is something we all have to get to at some point in our lives, and hopefully sooner rather than later. So we're going to have a fun conversation this week with a new friend, Tez Brooks. He has written the book Adult-o-Nomics, How to Nail It on Your Own, which is a really fun kind of guide, a primer, if you will, on lessons he's learned, just things he has young adult kids, conversations he's had with folks about what this looks like to go after maturity. When is it important? When can you just chill? I know we're often prone to just freak out about everything and think that we're behind, but calm down. We're going to give you some great principles here. So when he's not talking about adulting, Tez is a writer. He's a speaker. He's actually a writing coach. He's a journalist and missionary. He has done all the things. Oh my goodness, even being a police chaplain. We're going to be, a molecular biologist. I don't know. We'll probably find out more here. But Tez, welcome to the Boundless Show.
Thanks, Lisa. It's good to be here.
This is really fun for us. So Adult-o-Nomics, I had a minor panic attack because it reminded me of studying like economics in high school and college. And I'm like, if you pull out graphs, dude, I'm going to be out. Okay, I can't even handle it. And plotting things on graphs. But we're going to talk about this in a really fun, hopefully helpful way for those of you listening. And so I want you to start, though, a little bit. Obviously, there's some of this that is born out of your own journey through young adulthood. And I know it got off to a pretty interesting start at the age of 19 in particular, maybe a little journey that happened. So talk about what that looked like. Was this common among people you knew to just be, I feel like, if you're not a millennial or a Gen Z, you kind of were much more ordered in the way you lived your life. And it was very assumptive, but clearly not for you.
Yeah, well, I was a bit of a mama's boy. I was the youngest of four boys. Mm-hmm. And when I was 18, my mom passed away unexpectedly. Just went in for a gallbladder operation and never came out. And she really just, because I think because I was the baby, she kind of did a lot for me. Mm-hmm. It was just easier. She was, my mom and dad were older parents, and I was kind of on autopilot. The problem is, I didn't know how to do autopilot. And so at 19, I moved away to go to college about 1,000 miles away from home and didn't even know how to do my laundry, let alone anything else, how to take care of my dorm room, anything like that. So I was pushed into that quite quickly. And my dad, he got remarried really quick. And so I just didn't have him either to lean on. He was pretty busy starting a new life with his new wife. And so, there were times when I would just do laundry with a red shirt and all my underwear ended up pink for the week. And I just had to learn to get through that. And I saw a lot of other of my fellow students going through the same thing. Yeah. It was a bit difficult, but I learned how to do it. And the more I learned, the more confident I became in being an adult.
Yeah. Learning things the hard way, which is interesting because as I've thought about this, and especially as I talk to older folks, a lot of criticisms I hear of younger generations is they can't take responsibility, they're entitled, they don't know all the things. When I was your age, we had to do, when I was 10 years old, I had to raise livestock or something. I don't know. It was always something really, really outrageous and difficult to attain, I guess. What would you see as you look and compare different generations and even having your own young adult kids? What are some things that maybe younger adults are having to go after more? Maybe they don't assumptively have these skills anymore. And what are some things that where maybe young adults are excelling even over previous generations.
Yeah, I think a big plus for them is YouTube. You can get on YouTube and learn how to change the headlight of your car
Yeah.
in 5 minutes, how to, fix a microwave or whatever. And so that really works. And that's a great use of technology, especially because a lot of times I don't think it's the young adults' fault. We have a lot of helicopter parents these days who are saying, I just want to help them get a better start in life. And what's actually happening, I see, is just that they're not letting them make mistakes, and they'd rather do it for them because they know how to do it, rather than just being a little more hands off. So I think a lot of that's not their fault. The young adults, the anxiety comes because the parents done it for them too much. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's funny, if you're listening and you're a young adult, don't be offended by this. Just you're probably thinking of this or agreeing in a kind of rueful way because you're maybe now on your own and saying, man, I wish I would have learned this, or I wish that this would have been in my wheelhouse, or I had more confidence going into young adulthood. Because we're not talking about helicoptering 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds. Okay, we're talking about helicoptering literally like 20 and 30 somethings, which totally still does happen, you guys. And this it may have been your experience as well. So, it's funny because I think of today's young adults, Tez, and I think of them being very scrappy, very entrepreneurial. You think of the average 20 or 30 something that has to go out and get a gig on the side because maybe they're unemployed or underemployed. And so I think that's really kudos to them for being very forward thinking and like, what do I need to do? What does this look like? And recognizing that. And so there's not entitlement in that, I don't think. But at the same time, I don't know. Honestly, you guys, I'm Gen X. I can't sew a thing. I took a class when I was in junior high, didn't retain a thing, can't do a button, can't do, whatever. I'm a pretty lame cook. I can follow a recipe, but all these grandmas that are like, let me just take a roast and do something with it. I'm like, nope, that's not going to happen with me. So I think there are some things where we're like, man, yeah, we could definitely go after some gains here. I think one of the things you really land on in the book, and we want to talk about some of the fun skills too, but just this idea of recognizing, for example, the anxiety that we have around decisions that we have to make, and just what it looks like for us to realize that, yes, growth comes, but it comes with time. And so what do you think, Tez, are some of the things that young adults are most stressing out about, and what does it look like? Because obviously we're going to come to saying how much we have to trust God in the process, but where are we kind of shooting ourselves in the foot when it comes to maybe embracing life or feeling like maybe we haven't made the mark or we don't have it together?
Yeah, I think comparing ourselves with other young adults is a big hindrance. Instead of saying, you know what, God, what have you gifted me to do? I may not learn how to sew. I don't need to learn that, or how to change the oil in my car. I'll just take it to the mechanic. Things are different nowadays than when we were younger. And I would say there is concern, and that's a healthy consideration about something. When you're concerned about an issue, concern keeps you from going to those dark places that anxiety does. For instance, you might be concerned that the electric bill you paid by mail may not get delivered on time, so you have to pay a late fee. Anxiety often comes from worrying about something that may or may not even happen. And that concern may turn into anxiety if, for instance, you start worrying about that electricity, that it'll be turned off, and therefore your alarm won't go off, making you late for work, so that you get fired, and then you lose your job, which means you have to move back with your parents or live on the streets. Thinking about things that are probably never going to happen turns that normal, healthy concern into anxiety. But even anxiety isn't necessarily bad. I look at the story of Jesus when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. When you read that, he's experiencing anxiety, but he worked through it. And he said, you know what, Father, if this is your will, please take it from me. But if it's your will for this to happen, then he embraced it. And so anxiety, I think, gets a a bad rap sometimes. It's okay to be a little concerned about things. It's when it starts, that's all that happens, and it starts to overcome you, and you can't even make normal daily choices.
Yeah.
That's when we have to say, okay, God, I need you. And I think that's the secret to people suffering with anxiety, is just running to the Lord and saying, hey, I can't do this, and that's okay, because I want to be totally dependent on you, Lord, not independent.
Yeah. It's interesting because it seems counterintuitive. Like if we are experiencing anxiety or we don't feel competent to do something, we should back off as much as possible and let the other people do it. Like, well, that's not my thing, so I need to not do it. But you actually argue in the book that there's joy in taking on responsibility, that there's growth there, that ultimately you're going to get to the place you want to be, that you're going to be respected for, and obviously it's very biblical. I mean, we're not... We're so prone to trend towards comfort and what is easy. We just want to do the easy things. We don't want to go after what's hard, but doing hard things is a great thing, not only as a life skill, but for a Christian as well. So tell us a little bit, Tez, about what that looks like. Because it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm going to have to start a business, or I'm going to have to go to Rwanda or something like that. I mean, you even talk about just how we choose to take on adult responsibilities, just some of the things that, that are going to be part and parcel of life that maybe we should embrace rather than run from as long as we can.
Yeah, it does build your confidence to tackle the world when you just take one or two things and say, you know what, I'm going to learn about this, whether I need to learn it from my parents and ask them some questions, or on YouTube. It doesn't matter where you're learning that, but not shying away from challenges, because I think the Lord can really use us when we step out. You mentioned earlier there's a lot of entrepreneur character in young people. I love that. I wish I had that. I probably would have found my dream job a little quicker or a lot quicker had I been more confident. But yeah, we didn't have that advantage. It was almost like, until you're married and have kids, you're not an adult, and so don't act like it.
Yeah, so true. Well, I do want to get to a few of your tips that you give just for pursuing adulthood. But before we do that, I want to address the idea of parents, because you did bring that up. What would you say is, we all assume, maybe this is like when we're 12 years old, that we're going to, at 18, we're going to be on our own. We're never going to look back. It's going to be so easy. We're going to be YouTube influencers and immediate millionaires or whatever. But the truth is, we end up remaining dependent on our parents in some way for probably a certain season. I know for me personally, I went out, lived on my own, had to go back, move in with my parents again because I had switched jobs and I was floundering and figuring out where I was. So how can we discern if we're getting appropriate levels of help from our parents, or if we're too dependent on them for various stages?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there's nothing wrong with moving back. I have one daughter who once told me, Dad, to me, if I ever have to move back, I consider that a failure. And I have another daughter.
No offense, but it's a failure. Yeah, okay.
But then I have another daughter who just moved back in with us, and she's 38, but she needs to get back on her feet, and she knew that this was a safe place for her. And so, yeah, it depends on different personalities. I have 4 different children that are completely different in how they launched out into the world, some more confident than others. But I would say, it's all about boundaries, and even not just training yourself, but even training your parents. And where you see them not willing to take a chance or let you take a chance, you need to just come out and say, you know what, here's the situation. I'd love your help to this point. And then I want to do this on my own. Rather than just, well, let's see where the world takes us and go with the flow. If you let the river carry you, it's going to carry you right down a waterfall. So you got to be careful about that.
And that is so true what you're saying. Sometimes we do have to train our parents because parents a lot of times have a hard time letting go. And they might guilt you into thinking that you need to stay for a certain reason, but it's mostly because they're afraid to launch into their new season of maybe empty nesting or whatever. And I've heard people give suggestions of like, yeah, if you're going to live at home for a season, still draw up a contract of, code of conduct, or maybe you're going to contribute a little bit to rent or to food or whatever that looks like.
House rules.
Kind of sets some standards for what this looks like. So it's not indefinite, like, hi, check back in 30 years. And if you're still here, we'll have a conversation. So I think that is really, really helpful.
Parents, we struggle as empty nesters. It's hard for us to say, oh, they don't need us anymore. And so it would be very easy for me to just say, you know what, I'll take care of you guys the rest of your life because I feel needed.
Yeah.
And I've had to let go with that because I didn't think I was like that. I started bragging, oh, I'm not a helicopter parent. I don't hover. But then when they start leaving, I'm like, well, where are you going? You're going to call me once a week at least, right?
Or once a day, if we're being realistic. Yeah.
Right.
That's so great. Okay, I want to get to your advice in the relationship and dating realm because you definitely give some good advice there for what that looks like. But I want to begin with just a few maybe down and dirty tips. The way I want to ask you this is, what are a few things that you would say now on the other side of young adulthood, let's say, because you're very close to your 20s, I'm sure, but you're not in your 20s anymore, Tez. What are some things that the average young adult should have under their belt or should be growing in by the time they're in their mid to late 20s, would you say? What are those like just young adult skills that maybe we don't think, or we don't want them to come and bite us because they hit us like the flu and we didn't realize like, oh, I need to know this. Just from your experience in adulting for many years now, what can young adults kind of go after and learn even today and this week?
Yeah, well, I'm going to start with what to avoid, and that's scrolling and watching all these videos on how to impress other people with how organized your refrigerator is on the inside, and decorating the inside of your refrigerator, and how to have the perfect charcuterie board that impresses people. There's so much pressure there.
I do like a good charcuterie board.
I do too.
I'm gonna be honest,
but you know what? Yeah, once you start digging into it, it's not pretty anyway. So it's only pretty for a few minutes. So I would just encourage you, to avoid the pressure of trying to measure up to the world trying to make you perfect, because we're not. But on the positive side, what to look for, like you asked, what are one or two things that you would want to prepare for? I would say, taking care of a house, just knowing, and start while you're still at home, taking care of your bedroom. Instead of, not folding anything and leaving it all on the floor, because that's just going to carry over into your dorm room and then into a marriage one day. And so I would say, grocery shopping, learn how to do it wisely. Yep. You don't have to eat out every night. Learn how to cook something simple. Even if it's just get a crock pot and learn a few recipes. It's very easy. If you can make chili, that'll last 2 or 3 days if you get a big pot. And it's just a bunch of canned vegetables thrown in there with some meat. So you don't have to be perfect at anything. Just survive. Yeah.
I'm reminded of my conversation I had with a friend who dated a guy for a while who only shopped in convenience stores. And she finally said, I cannot date this guy because she's super thrifty. And he's like paying $7 for a loaf of bread at a 7-Eleven. And she's like, no, absolutely not. And he wasn't really teachable about it. He's just like, it's just so easy. I just run in there and get what I need. And she's like, yeah, we're not going to work. So anyway, that's a good point.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It sounds like she's going to be a good wife, too.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, she's pretty responsible. So that's great. I was thinking too, if I were to add to the list, something that came to mind, and of course this is very not tangible, but for every young adult to learn how to appropriately address conflict and to have hard conversations. That is something no one will ever teach you. And I know so many adults in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond who are passive aggressive, who are, stonewalling people, who don't know how to have a good or a tough conversation. And in that, learning how to apologize appropriately, and that just seems like a big ask or seems like a big skill to have, but it's something that we learn,
Absolutely.
And obviously with the Holy Spirit's help. So that's just something that that came to mind too. So that's really great. Those are some good things. I know we've talked before on the show too about learning how to do a budget, like what it looks like to manage your own money. You even put the example in the book of how to dress appropriately as an adult, especially like if you're going to be on the job or you're going to go to a job interview.
Right.
What does it look like to show up and dress well and put your best foot forward? I think that's great too. So, all right. Well, I do want to end on you give a tip 247. When looking for a spouse, never settle, but don't wait for perfection either. Strike a balance. Why is that a healthy approach, would you say?
Yeah, I think because, like it says, it's balanced. There's extremes on either side that'll cause frustration. I met my wife at age 36, and the older we got, the more we tended to either get too picky or too desperate. So that's where that balance comes in. Prayer is the key to finding a spouse, really. If we ask God for bread, is he going to give us a stone? No. He's going to honor our prayers and our desire to seek him because he's for us and he only wants the best for us. And we need to trust him to show us the red flags in relationships, but also the green lights. He knows things we don't, and our baggage can often get in the way of God placing two people together for his higher purposes. So, yeah.
It's interesting because I so often hear people say, well, that if they really love me, they're just going to accept me as I am. And I'm like, that who even does that? None of us do. We all want someone who's willing to grow. We all should be willing to grow.
Yes.
We're not going to be the same person in 10, 15 years that we are today, hopefully. So I think it is, it's almost like we get offended when people are like, they challenge us or they're calling us to stretch in something. And I think in a dating relationship, that's important as well.
Yeah, that's the world's mindset to say, no, I'm not going to change. You need to change. And we adopt the world's mindset so easily, we forget what Scripture teaches us. So, yeah.
Well, folks, the book is Adult-o-Nomics. This is, it's fun because it is literally... You're thinking that we're getting all heady with this, but it is literally you open it up and there are tips. Like you could walk through 4 of these in a day and just maybe you need to create your own little checklist to be like, okay, good, I'm doing okay, on this or this I don't. Like I said, some of them we didn't even get into are super practical, like never mix bleach and ammonia. It creates a deadly gas. Hello. But really that mindset behind it of what does it look like for you to be humble and teachable and realize that adulting really is about looking to others, learning from others, and realizing that you have something to contribute as well. So.
It really is an easy read, because it's just one-liners. It's just 500 one-liners. So you can read 1 or 2 and
Super fun. So how to nail it on your own, okay? Adult-o-Nomics. So Tez, thanks again.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.